So this topic, college is a scam. Now, I've talked about college being a scam for a long time. Actually, I talked about the education system, period, being a scam. All of the education system is specifically referring to the United States of America's system. So you have the K through 12 system, which is pretty uniform. Now, colleges are much more unique. One college is very different from another college. University of Pennsylvania is different from Penn State. And the University of Texas is different from Texas A&M. They kind of can operate in the ways that they want to operate. However, there are some generalities amongst them that I'm going to be talking about in this 3-part series that helps explain why college itself is a scam. And it's not so much about who teaches at what school and what the curriculum is. That's not the level that I'm getting to, because as I just said, those are very specific to each school, and they can kind of do things how they want to do them. But this topic actually got fueled by my recent reading of a book called The Debt Trap by Josh Mitchell. And this book is all about how colleges and the United States government worked together with, we'll call it, positive intentions to help everybody go to college, because there were people in power who believed having people educated through university would put them in a better position to be successful in America. So they started with positive intentions, allegedly, but it's blown up into a complete trap, as the title of the book says, because more people were given money by these loan companies that were created by the government and backed by the government, and then colleges kept raising their prices, and then they kept giving out more loans, and then people get trapped in this debt that they picked up under the auspices of let's go to school and take this debt on to go to school to get a degree that'll get me a better job than I would have got without the degree, and then I'll be making so much money that I'll pay back the loan easily. As a general, I'm just generalizing how people could justify taking out huge loans to go to college, but then they end up not able to pay them back. Many people end up not able to pay them back, not everybody. But as I said, this book, The Debt Trap, you should read this. Anytime you hear me mention a book, go read it, even if it's not something that's specifically in your purview. Like myself, I'm not in college. I don't work in a college. I have a child who, as of this recording, is 2 years old, and I don't know if he'd be going to college. He's 16 years away, at least, if he's going to go to college. So why am I reading a book about college loan debt? Now, I'm not a person who's dealing with it. So why am I reading this book? I read books on these subjects because I like to learn about things that are completely outside of my normal space. So you hear what I talk about here. I talk about mindset, I talk about entrepreneurship. I'm a former athlete. I talk about personal growth and personal development, professional development. Yes, I read a lot of books in that area. Probably 50% of the stuff I read is in that area, but the other 50%, I'll read things that have nothing to do with any of those things, because I want to have an eclectic mentality. And if I meet somebody who's not into those things, I still need to be able to bring something to the conversation. So I need to know about things outside of just what I focus on, because that would make for a very dull individual. That applies to all of you as well. So even if you don't have a reason to care about college debt, you should read it anyway, so you understand how it happens, because the framework for how that happened with the college loaning and debt system is similar to how it works in many other spaces when you put the dots together. Read the book and it'll put the dots together for you. All you have to do is read it and think. So, as I said, this is not entirely because of that book. I've been trashing the education system in America for a long time, as far back as episode number 199, literally 3,000 episodes ago, that was titled The Scam That Is the American Educational System. This book just put even more detail behind what I've already understood, and it explained the details of how and why it happened, like who was involved, what companies did what government person did what, and that's why the book I encourage you to read it, especially if you're a person who is actively in college, you have a child in college, you work in the college system, and or you are paying back student loans yourself. Now, I'm going to offer the disclaimer that, as I often do, that what I'm talking about here today is not new. I already gave you that disclaimer, which is why I often refer you back to previous episodes where I've talked about these same things, because I don't want any of you to think that I just came up with this yesterday and then decided to talk about it today. Even though sometimes I come up with my topics that quickly, the seeds of the concept are not brand new when I talk about them here. So I just have many updated thoughts and insights on these things, and in the future, who knows? Another 3,000 episodes from now, if this show is still around, we're still doing what we're doing, I may talk about it again with different information, because things change over the years. 3,000 episodes, what would that be? Another 8 or so years? I think I'll be alive then, knock on wood. So let's get into it. Point number one, topic once again, is a scam. That is the college system, or just college is a scam, period. Number one, Dre Baldwin, that's me. I went to college, all right, and I have a 4-year business degree. And you could say, just by looking at me on the surface, you could say Dre Baldwin is a success story of the American educational system. Technically, you could say that. And here's another thing I'll say. If I had the opportunity, you put me back at age 18, knowing what my planned future was, which was play professional sports, and then I had an idea in my head that I could go into entrepreneurship. Didn't know exactly how, but that was the idea. Would I go to college again? The answer is yes, I would. I'm telling you, the college is a scam. And the very first point in my 3-part series of college being a scam is that if I had the opportunity, I would go to college again and allow myself to get scammed. Yes, that's exactly what I would do. I would go to college. Now, let me explain something to you. There are good reasons why I went to college. Let me tell you the good reasons. Number one is the social experience. The best thing that I got out of college was my social experience. That means the parties that I went to, the people that I met, the friends that I made, people who are still friends of mine to this day, and people who maybe I haven't seen or talked to them in a while, but if I ran into them, it would be just like old times I've ran into them. Let's say somebody I knew in school 15, 20 years ago, we would still be cool to this very day. The social experience was probably I'll put all 3 of these on the same level, was one of the best things that I got from going to college. And if I went to college again, I did an episode on this. Let me see if I can refer you back to that episode because I did explain this. If I went back to college, let me see where that episode is. This was episode number 1578, how I would do my college years differently. One of the things that I said in that episode, I hope I said it, I should have said it because I don't think my answer has changed. I would party a whole lot more. It's one of the things I would do differently if I went to college. I would go to more parties. I went to a lot when I was there, but if I went back, I would go to more parties than I did. I would talk to more girls. I talked to a lot of girls when I was in college. I would talk to even more girls. There's a bunch of girls in college that I didn't talk to, that if I went back, I would talk to all of them. I would leave no stone unturned. I would play a lot more basketball. So I did play a lot of basketball in college. Again, I would just do more of it. So these are things I already did in college. I would just do more if I knew then what I know now. And when it comes to academics, schoolwork, I would do the same amount of just enough work to get by and to graduate. That's what I would do. If I went back to school, that's exactly what I would do. I would do just enough work to get by and graduate. And knowing now what I knew then, assuming let's say that we were back in between 2000 and 2004. That's when I went to college. I guess we wouldn't have access. We wouldn't have the internet like we have now, but I would still be a little bit more smart about how I got my schoolwork done. I could use money to pay off students who actually like doing work to write papers for me, do my homework for me, maybe somehow, some way get me answers to a test. I would leverage my resources to get work done that I didn't want to do myself. I spent a good amount of time doing schoolwork when I was in college. If I went back, I would do no schoolwork, zero. I would try, or at least I would try. If I could get away with doing no schoolwork, and when I say get away, meaning finding ways to still graduate while not doing schoolwork, I would do as little of it as I possibly could so I could put more of my time, resources, and attention and energy into basketball, girls, and partying. That's what I would do if I went back to college. So if you want to know why I would go back to college, those are the 3 reasons. And I'm not joking when I say that. I seriously mean that's exactly what I would do. Now, college was also a great experience of semi-autonomy, which is another thing that all college students get, at least if you're living in the college environment, like an off-campus apartment or in the dorms, because you're out of your parents' home, but you're not so independent that you couldn't call on them for help if you needed it. So it was a great transition period for me, and I would use that. That would be useful for me again. So as I said, I would do it again. Now, the bad part of college is that the original purpose of the educational system in America, and many people may not know this, but you should know it, was to create a training environment that would lead young men and women into the workforce prepared to do manual labor in factories during the Industrial Revolution. The system that we have now for education was birthed out of the fact that companies who had a big role in the government, as they still do today, but even bigger back then, they had a big role in how the government did things. They would, let's say influence the government to create a system that would send workers into the workforce already ready to do what the company's jobs would require of them. I don't mean necessarily teaching you how to work a assembly line. What I mean is students were trained, and you think about this, you were in school, if you're around my age bracket over the age of 30, you probably remember this in school. It's a little bit different now, but generally the same concept. They've changed a few of the things cosmetically, but generally the concept is the same. You show up, you sit down and wait for someone to tell you what to do or give you permission to do stuff. You do it until a bell rings, and then you go to a different place where somebody else tells you what to do. If you need a break, or you need to go to the bathroom, or you want to do something out of the the parameters, you have to ask permission, get permission, and then you get to go do it for a limited period of time. They tell you when to go eat lunch. They tell you when to come back. If you can't come in, you have to have a valid reason for not coming to school that day, i.e., like not missing a day at work. And you have to do the job the right way. And if you don't do it the right way as prescribed by the job, then you get fired or reprimanded in some way, shape, or form. Is that not how school works? Again, school was designed to produce employees to go work in the workforce back in the days when it was manual labor, when you were just training people to all basically do the same thing. Now, again, it's changed in many ways because we're not in the Industrial Revolution anymore. Nowadays, it's about technology and it's more mind work than it is physical work. There are still people who do physical work, but there are a lot of people going into doing work with their brains rather than with their hands. But the similarities are still there. Again, show up, leave, show up when we tell you to, leave when we tell you to, go to lunch when we tell you to, come back when we tell you to, make sure you clock in and clock out. Bell rings to tell you to go from one workstation to the next workstation. Sit down, shut up, wait for somebody to tell you what to do, what to think, what is allowed. School is designed like jobs. The purpose is to create. This was the purpose when they had originally created, to create dutiful and obedient humans who didn't think for themselves. They just knew how to follow instructions. Now, following instructions is not necessarily a negative thing. I know how to follow instructions very well. I would be a very good employee. Any of you who's a boss, I would be a very good employee if I worked for you. Challenge is I'm never working for anybody again in my life. I've decided that. But I was, when I did have jobs, I was a very good employee because I know how to follow rules. I know how to follow structure. I know how to respect authority. I know how to do all those things. I just choose not to put myself in a position where I have to do them. So this is, when you hear people talk about the system, quote unquote, this is the system. What I just described to you, this is the system. They want the job industry wanted people showing up to the workforce already prepared and conditioned to do what they were told to do and not think for themselves. This is what they wanted. I'm not saying every single employee is like that. Of course, these days, that's not necessarily what they need. But for the most part, that's what many of you had to do on a daily basis. I know this. And systems, let me be clear, are great things. System is not a bad thing. So when you hear people say the system, usually they're saying it in some type of negative way. But a system is actually a great thing when you're the one in charge of the system. The system is great when you have a system and you are implementing your system and is producing whatever result you want it to produce, which I hope it is. If it's your system, you should probably have it doing what you want it to do. The system is not always a great thing when you are a product of the system rather than the one running the system. That's two different things. So you just got to decide what side of the equation you want to be on. The good news is for all of us, we all have a choice. Point number 2, today's topic once again is why college is a scam. Number 2, how did college get pushed on us? So let's go into this. I mentioned this a little bit in the open and a little bit in point number 1. Let's talk about it a little bit more detail. In the 1960s, we had a president named Lyndon Baines Johnson. He's the one who succeeded John F. Kennedy when JFK was assassinated. And Lyndon Johnson, as part of the government's decision to give things to citizens to level the playing field, college was one of his ideas. So all the handouts that the government has been giving out and still gives out on many levels to citizens. Sometimes they give it out to everybody, sometimes they give it out to certain groups, or it's targeted towards certain groups, but it may end up going to many groups. Things like welfare, for example, things like any types of tax breaks, things like student loans. These all were the brainchild of what was happening in the 1960s. This is, we had the civil rights movement. You got the assassination of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. You got John F. Kennedy. So there was a lot of things. The 1960s was a big inflection point in the United States of America. And one of the things that Lyndon Baines Johnson decided to do was we need to, quote unquote, level the playing field for all Americans. We need everybody to get on the same level. So what we now call diversity, equity, and inclusion, Lyndon Baines Johnson the seed of it was planted with what LBJ did back in the 60s, or the ideas he came up with, and then his administration started putting these things to work, and then because he had the structure in place, the infrastructure, further administrations just kept pushing it. So parents saw it as part of the American dream. There's another part of the idea, the American dream. What's the American dream? To buy a house, own that house, basically put roots down. You hear some of you even use this phrase to this day. Some of you are using it of the house that you are in right now at this exact moment. I want to buy a house so that I have roots. And this was all sold to us. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you going to college or buying a house and having roots if that's what you want. I want you to understand that these things were marketed to us as Americans. These are not just random independent ideas that you came up with. They were marketed to us to have everybody buy a house. Why? Because it made the housing industry money, because it got you on a payment plan for the next 30 years. Now, do you think that's good for them? Of course it is. With the interest that you pay, that was marketed to you. And again, I'm not saying you did anything wrong if you bought a house. I just want you to understand, you didn't just randomly come up with that idea independently. It was sold to you. Same way going to college was sold to us. So it was sold to our parents, most of you, depending on your age bracket. Maybe you were the parent. Maybe your parents sold it to you. That part of the American dream, similar to home ownership, was that going to college puts you in a better position for career success than not going to college would put you in a position to do. If you were in school in the times that I was in school, let's say the 80s, 90s, maybe early 2000s, you may have even saw graphics or had data presented to you by your teachers that said people who graduate from college make more money over the course of their careers than people who don't graduate from college. Has any of you ever heard that? Yes, and generally it can be true, but that's only a piece of the information because they don't tell you how much loans that person has to pay back who's making more money. So, and who's keeping more money is the better question. See, they don't give you that graphic. See, the person who goes straight from high school to they learn a trade and it doesn't cost them nearly as much money to learn the trade as it costs to go to college. They go start making money sooner than you. You're still in school. You start paying back a loan that's a whole lot more money than what the trade school student had to pay back. They're already in the black. You're still in the red 10, 15, 20 years later. Well, yeah, you made more money, but are you keeping more money? See, that's the part of the story they don't tell you. And again, this is all marketing. So I want you all to understand that many of the ideas that all of us have, many of the things that you have believed over the course of your life, you never directly or in detail examined these beliefs, especially if they came from your parents or they came from your teachers or they came from influential people around you. Understand that these ideas were sold to them and then sold to you, or they were sold directly to you. Again, these are not just random independent thoughts that we all came up with. So parents, many of our parents saw it as part of the American dream. They didn't go to college. They wanted to make sure you went to college. And it was entrenched in their minds. And with that idea entrenched, what happened is the increased costs of college started happening because they knew that people were emotionally connected to going to college. So if I know you're emotionally connected to buying a certain product and I'm the supplier of that product, I will come to understand, well, I can just manipulate the price of this. I can keep raising the price of this product because people are going to pay it no matter what because they're emotionally engaged in making sure they buy it. So if I'm selling it for $10, well, I might change the price to $50. And I see you keep buying it, I might raise it to $200. You keep buying it, I might raise it to $1,000. You keep buying it, I raise it to $5,000. You keep buying it, I raise it to $50,000. This is literally what happened with universities. Again, read the book that I told you about at the beginning of this episode. It's called The Debt Trap by Josh Mitchell. All right, this is what happens when people are emotionally connected to something and they just want to have it and have to have it. The sellers can maliciously take advantage of your desire to have the product by raising the prices on you. And you don't even realize what's happening, even though it's happening right in front of your face because your emotions are overpowering your logic, if there is even any logic. See the housing bubble. All right, those of you, that one wasn't that long ago. Those of you who were around and you were active in the markets between 2007 and 2009, you saw what happened. Maybe some of it affected you in some ways. Maybe you just saw it from the outside looking in, but many of you remember. Why did the housing bubble become what it did? Because people got greedy, sellers got greedy, and buyers got greedy. People got greedy buying stuff that they really shouldn't have been buying financially because it was so easy to quote unquote buy these things based on stuff that was offered to them that was really worth nothing. And eventually the bubble burst and it screwed a lot of people over. Some people are still digging out from that. And here we are, 15 years later. The housing bubble did this. The tuition bubble in school, that's what's happening right now. And eventually that bubble is going to burst. These are not coincidences. So in the process of all of this, a lot of money got made by who? The banks and the businesses behind, or the businesses and the banks behind them. The ones who give you the loans, they make a ton of money. They're making a whole lot of money. Anytime you want to know how or why things are happening, especially in the big picture or even the small picture, you want to know why somebody is doing something that seems to not make any sense, follow the money. Well, first of all, make sure that it doesn't make sense. Maybe you just don't understand what you don't understand. But once you understand everything and it still doesn't make sense, follow the money. The money will tell you why people are doing what they're doing or how they're doing what they're doing, if it doesn't make sense in any other way. This is why I suggest that you not only listen to what I'm telling you, but also, again, cross-reference the things that I'm referring you to, because this is where I often cross-reference the places where I get my information, if it's a book. But sometimes if I'm listening to, let's say, material or YouTube or a podcast, I may not always reference it. But you want to understand the depth of how these systems work. Nobody does something for nothing, especially people who tend to be relatively smart. They don't, excuse me, people who work in the government, people who work in corporate spaces, people who work in colleges, they tend to be relatively smart people. When I say smart, I don't mean they have a college degree. That doesn't make you smart. I just mean these people know how to think. All right? They're not one-dimensional thinkers. They know what they're doing. Even if you disagree with them, doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And do not be fooled by or when the government or some politician promises or actually does give something out to a citizen, because there's always hooks inside that bait. All right, any of you fish, when you throw bait out into the water and the fish doesn't realize that there may be a hook in the bait and they just bite the bait, what happens to the fish? Well, we know what happens. They become dinner. All right, they become a fish dinner for your family because they didn't think about what is the trade-off of me taking this easy bait, this easy meal. Remember the second law of economics, ladies and gentlemen. There's no such thing as a free lunch. First law is that it's supply and demand. Second law is no such thing as a free lunch. Anything that it seems like you're just getting for free without trying, understand you have to do something in order to get things. And anything you get without paying for it, you will pay for it. Maybe you just got to pay on the back end, but you will pay for it. Nothing in life is free, so, except what's free. Now, your brain is free. The standard equipment you came with, like look in the mirror with no clothes on, that's free. Everything else costs. All right, freedom itself ain't free. So there is always some way to make money on the back end of a giveaway. Anything handed out to you, there's always money made on the back end. It may not be obvious to you how the money is made. That's the point. That's the point. So it wasn't obvious to a whole bunch of people who bought quote unquote houses in 2007 with not having great credit and not having a lot of money to put down and no collateral. It wasn't obvious to them that they were going to have to pay something back on the back end. It wasn't until later that they realized they were the ones getting screwed, even though they thought they were getting a deal. Well, you were getting a deal, just not the kind of deal that you wanted. So when it comes to the idea of college being this ticket to adult success, again, this was a marketing plan, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a logical thinking process. Even though many of you are college graduates who have become successful by most measures, that doesn't mean that you would have been successful even if you didn't go to college. Maybe, who knows? We don't know. But this idea of college being a ticket to adult success, there was a beautiful process created to make this a mindset that many people still live with to this very day. And the same way that the mindset of buying a house is part of the American dream, or buying a house is the adult thing to do, or renting is quote unquote throwing away money, so I might as well buy a house. I still talk to people to this very day. I live in a condominium building or apartment building, and I will talk to people and they'll talk about, in a couple years or after this lease that I'm in is up, I'm going to go buy something, or I want to buy the one that I'm living in right now. Adults, there are many adults who still live with this mentality that going and buying is the natural end game to what they're doing. And again, I'm not saying it's wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of people who buy and own their homes and have not rented for a long time. At the same time, once you understand this was marketed to you. And when you know something's being marketed to you, you should ask yourself, why is it being marketed to me? And what do they gain by selling me this idea? And what does it cost me when I buy it? Point number 3, topic again today is part 1 of our 3-part series, how college is a scam. Number 3, increased costs that are not balanced out by wages. I talked about this a good amount when I was touching on the middle class is disappearing series that we just recently did. Colleges are businesses themselves. You understand that college is a business. They saw how the government was handing out money to send people to school and making it almost a mandate for life success. It was sold that way. That hey, if you don't go to college, you're not going to be successful. So you got to go to college so you can be successful. Well, colleges said, well, damn, if coming through our halls or our campuses is a mandate for life success, and the government is giving out as much money as they can so people can pay us with it, well, let's just charge as much as we possibly can. Let me ask a question. How many of you are parents right now paying for a student to go to college? All right, is it costing as much as it possibly can? Okay, so you see that this one worked. I ain't got to explain this one to you. You already know. How many of you are paying back student loans from years ago? Okay, so you already know. You have real life experience with this. This is what happens. When Vice President, as of this recording, Kamala Harris announced that she was going to give a $25,000 credit to anyone buying, any first-time home buyer in America, well, the people who sell homes were salivating. They would say, well, I hope Kamala wins, because if she wins and everybody has an extra $25,000 in their pocket, we're just going to raise the prices of houses $25,000 because we know you got that free money. And the rest, the balance of it will just be money that you would have had to spend anyway. So it would have been great for people who buy and sell houses or build houses had Kamala actually done that $25,000 credit thing, and maybe she would have done it, but she didn't win. But the whole point being, colleges understand they're business people. This is the United States. The United States is a capitalistic society. And in a capitalistic society, people will go after the dollar. And this is not a negative thing. It's just a thing. It's not a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. It's just a thing. Everything in life has a trade-off, ladies and gentlemen. The trade-off of a capitalistic society is that everybody is going after the money. So if you give people an incentive to charge you more, they will charge you more. If they feel like they can charge you more and still get paid, well, why would they charge you less? If I can charge you $100 instead of charging you 10 and I get the same amount of sales and the same amount of satisfied customers, I'm charging 100. Why would I charge 10 when I can charge 100? What, out of the kindness of my heart, I'm just going to charge less? No, not in America. Not in America, ladies and gentlemen. That's not how it works. And if and when you get into sales, I would give you the same advice that I just explained. Get the money that you can get. Remember, what's the first law of economics? Supply and demand. If people will pay 100, you should be charging 100. Why would you charge 10 if you could charge 100? You're costing yourself money. Why would you do that? So as colleges, again, their businesses, when they see this, all they do is raise their prices. And they keep raising their prices. The cost of college keeps going up. If you went to college already and you graduated at least 10 years ago, ask yourself how much tuition was then when you went to school and go look up the tuition of the school that you go to now and compare the numbers. Did it get bigger or smaller? Guaranteed 100% it got bigger, no matter what school you went to. So if I was running a college today, I would do the same thing that these people are doing. Now, I do have work on your game university, but we're a different type of university. We're not this kind of university / college that I'm talking about right here. In a capitalistic society, this is what happens. I am not against capitalism. I'm a registered capitalist, as we like to say. I'm all for capitalism, but that does not mean capitalism does not have its trade-offs. It triggers greed in human beings. And greed can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing, depending on how it is utilized. And none of us is immune to this trigger, by the way. So don't think that we're talking about those greedy people out there. You could be just as greedy. And as a matter of fact, there are times in life when I would advise you to be greedy. Greed is not a bad thing, depending on how you use it. So if you're a salesperson and you know the government is handing out money for people to afford your product at twice its current price, would you double your price? I would tell you you'd be stupid not to. If you saw a widget for $200 right now and the government starts giving out $400 only so people can buy your widget, that's the only thing they can use the money for. This is how college loans work, by the way. They'll give you a loan for $200,000, but you can't use it for anything other than going to college. You can't just get $200,000 cash. See, if they were doing that, then a lot of people would not go to college. They would just take the $200K, maybe start a business, maybe go to trade school for $20,000, keep the $180 and use that to launch their business or whatever they want to do with it. Finance something, put money aside, invest. Why is the government only giving the money out just for student loans? You got to understand, follow the money. Why are they doing this? Because they're working together with the universities. This is all a system. This is a system. So if the government, back to my example, they're giving out loans only for people to buy the widget that you sell, and the loans they're giving out are $400 and your widget's currently $200, would you not raise the price to $400? Again, as a business coach, if you told me that scenario, you say, Dre, what do you think I should do? I would say you'd be a fucking fool if you didn't raise the price to $400. You're leaving money on the table. Why would you leave money on the table? Your customers are going to spend that money one way or another. They're either going to spend it with you or they're going to spend it with somebody else. Go get that money. Are you in business or not? What is business? Business is the exchange of resources. One of those resources is usually money. Supply and demand, folks. First law of economics. If people will supply $400 for a widget, you should be charging at least $400 for your widget. Period. So the government's giving the money away. So colleges raise their prices. If the government deemed that the money given away has to be spent on your product and they can't use the money any other way, of course you should get the money. I would go to the government. I would ask them, hey, give out even more money. All right, you're giving out enough that they could spend $400 on a widget. What if you gave away enough money they could spend $4,000 on a widget? And if the government says, okay, then I'm raising my price to $4,000. This is exactly what's happening with colleges, by the way. This is how human beings work. We respond to incentives. And this is just the first part of our series. So let me recap what I gave you here today, and tomorrow we'll get into the next part. Topic is college is a scam. It's going to be a 3-part series. Number 1, I went to college and I would go back. I told you, social experience, the partying, the girls, the basketball, I would do all those things again and do as little schoolwork as possible. Even though I am a success story, so to speak, of the educational system, I'm a success despite my experience in the educational system, not because of it. Number 2, why this got pushed on us? Because Lyndon Baines Johnson decided that America needed to level the playing field for everyone. So they came up with things like affirmative action, what later became morphed into the diversity, equity, and inclusion. Things like everybody needs to own a house, which made a lot of money for the housing industry, and everyone needs to go to college, which made a lot of money for the college industry. So again, folks, follow the money. It all makes sense when you follow the money. Number 3, increased costs that are not balanced out by wages. In other words, people have more money they have to pay to go to college, but the money that they're making at the careers they got because they went to college is not surpassing the amount that they had to pay back based on going to college. So again, this is the trap. That's why I told you to read the book called The Debt Trap by Josh Mitchell, where he explains all this in much more detail. All that said, tomorrow we're going to get into part 2 of the series. Make sure you go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You want a coach working with you who is real, to the point, no BS, no fluff, and we get straight to it. I think you know I'm that guy. Workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.